Yeah, welcome back. This is another episode of My White Whale. This is me color grading my thesis project whenever I have a chance. If you've noticed my voice is a little messed up, let's address that first. I've been away from a minute because I opt a festival. I won't say what because I don't think I should. And it was cool. I enjoyed it. And then the last day, the day before I was going to be able to actually use my pass, now that I opted, I caught that virus that's been going around for 3 years. And so, yeah, it's been the rest of my week. So I'm a little beat up. I feel fine now. I haven't had a fever in a while, but obviously my voice is pretty jacked right now. And I would say this is the reason I look this way is because of the virus. But if you've seen any of my other videos, I think that might not be so truthful. I'm just kind of unkempt when I do these. Yeah, whatever. So my voice is going to suck, but let's get into it. This is scene 8. Let me jump into there it is. Okay, so we can move this down. This is scene 8. This is what I would call a hero shot when you're color grading. You want to color from the hero shot. Obviously, this is already colored, but if you go into the node tree, other than the fact that it's got a wild Walter Valpato style color grade on it, you can turn the color grade off and nothing happens. This is baked in. This is Sony A7 II, yeah, not A7S, Sony A7 II, just Rec 709 baked in footage. Yeah, that's because this movie, or this film, I guess, TV episode, pilot, get your ass together, Matt, was shot with basically 2 cameras. Oh, my voice just got weird, hold on. Shot with 2 cameras. Sometimes separately, sometimes simultaneously. So like for instance, this obviously is log. This is Blackmagic 2.5K ProRes. However, right next to it, that's Rec 709, and it looks like it's out of focus. That was definitely day 1. That's Sony A7 II, Rec 709 8-bit. And so, food for thought. If you're going to shoot multiple cameras, which I highly encourage to speed up the process, especially if you have multiple camera operators available, make sure the cameras are at least in the same family. Like if you're going to use a Canon C300 and you don't have access to another Canon C300, at least have it be a Canon. Having said that, I've broken that rule a lot. I'm actually very good at making Panasonic look like Canon and making Canon look like Blackmagic. Yeah, but for the ease of everybody involved, if we were going to shoot most of it on Blackmagic, we should have probably found something else that was also Blackmagic to shoot with. Like, I know my buddy had a pocket cinema camera, not the pocket 4K, but the pocket cinema camera. That probably would have been a better choice. Would have been a nightmare for batteries, but it was what it was. Alternately, because when we added the Sony into the package at the last minute, because again, it was my director and director of photography's cameras, it was the same person. She had just got the Sony, and so this was going to be the first project she properly shot with the Sony, which, again, too young to. We should. I don't know. I won't speak ill about what that was, but because that was a Sony, what we should have done is I had a Sony A5100, I believe, at that time, and so we could have done a full Sony shoot, and that would have worked better for what we were doing. But yeah, we bounced around. So a lot of this is log, in the original Blackmagic. A lot of this is Sony. I don't really need to go down the rabbit hole of that. I think I've talked on other stuff about mismatching cameras, but for the sake of tonight, yeah. So let's talk about this. Yeah, this is burned in. This is Rec 709. I think it looks fine. It looks a little warm to me, but I believe on the day we did it that way on purpose. If I wanted to cool it down, I could. But I'm not upset about it either way. I think it looks good. The reason I chose this is I haven't started color grading, obviously. We'll get rid of this node grade. We'll get rid of this node grade. Let's get rid of all of them except for the last one because I know that. Well, let me do it there. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Yeah, but they're all going to have this giant node tree, which I'll talk about in a minute. But first, I just want to talk about if you get small project, small budget, going fast, some of the first things to go are lighting and then post-production when you don't have money and you don't have time. Yeah, I'd say the colorist is one of those ripcords you got to pull when it comes to budget and time, for sure. However, from the other direction, a good colorist, like a good editor, like a good VFX artist, could make the difference on a project. But honestly, from a holistic point of view, which is really where I think of it, the story has to be king, and errors and mistakes and flaws and ugliness and just amateur stuff can all be forgiven by an audience member as long as the story is compelling. So, you know, you can polish a turd all you want, but at the end of the day, Hollywood spits out how many movies a year, and how many of that percentage are absolutely unwatchable, not because they look bad, but because they are just objectively not good stories. So, you know, which is to say there's color work. I'm not, my feelings are not hurt when you don't hire me because you don't have the money, assuming you're using your money and resources. Boy, my voice is messed up right now. Yeah, okay. Assuming you're using your money and resources as a filmmaker to improve the story in some way, spend more time with the actors, hire a more experienced lighting technician so you don't have to be the one thinking about lighting, that kind of thing. Then no offense taken, but not hiring a colorist. So this is one of those. The reason I'm looking at this is this was just a day pickup shoot. It went really well. It was me, the director / director of photography, and the actor on a location that we had total control over. We lit it. It obviously looks lit. You can look there. That obviously looks lit. These are from a completely different place, but because, you know, it's just regular Rec 709 from the same Sony camera with approximately, there's probably the same Sony lenses. I think these are all the 50 millimeter Rokinon Cine DS lenses. It all matches basically fine. He's too hot in this, so I'd have to bring the heat down on this, but I think these two are even the same take, and they look fine. He looks a little hotter in this, but there's not much to change, and so that's sort of the ideal. I was consulting with a film school kid the other day, actually, and I was basically we were trying to get on the same page about the project that he's going to eventually hand over to me to color for him, pro bono, because he's a buddy and he's in film school, and you know, you got to pay it forward. Yeah, but one of the things is one of the big differences, at least as a colorist, in dealing with an up and comer versus a working pro versus the highest upper level, is the further you go in the sort of like the highest level, the less time you have to spend on balancing the image to just make the shots or make the scenes, you know, internally balanced correctly, and more time is spent on the more creative stuff and the more nuanced stuff. So I told him straight up, I was like, you know, unless your DP was like a working commercial DOP, most of my coloring time is going to be spent getting the exposures shot to shot in a given scene correctly, getting the colors and the lighting shot to shot in a given scene. Most of my energy is going to be spent into that in proportion to the look. And the look is going to go fast, and it's going to be quite simple because there just isn't enough time, and there's probably not enough data or reason to work on the nuance. I mean, like really high-end colorists will spend all this time drawing all these little, you know, we can take this, they'll do a vignette here, they'll, you know, change the lighting over here, they'll do another node, they'll do a vignette over here, they'll do all the lighting, but at the end of the day, it's in service of the product. And so in the case of like this shot, for instance, the product it's a tight on a guy having about a 45-second learning experience, and that's really all you need to sell. Honestly, we shot it, we were happy with the way we shot it. I could make it look better, but there really isn't much reason to. So especially in the context of other stuff. So here's the scene that happens right before it, chronologically in the story. Yeah, the whole thing takes place in a car, and it's actually a continuation of scene 6. We can even look at scene 6, which was our day 1 with all the errors in it. Scene 6 is a very long scene. It's in time, it's about 4 minutes, which is about a fifth of the total runtime, so it's a huge scene in that regard. But it also took us 2.5 days to shoot, and that first day was all over the map. There's huge mistakes in there. Look how that's Rec 709. That's completely blown out. So, unlike this scene, which is just a few shots with one camera, very simply set up and basically baked in, good to go. For the sake of what we were doing, I think the look inspiration at the time was like New Girl, so just we had to be able to see everybody. That was the important thing. Regular people colors, but we had to be able to see everybody. Obviously, we didn't do New Girl because there's a lot more contrast on his face than New Girl would ever do, because New Girl likes to shoot flat, which is kind of what this is actually, hilariously. But my point is, baked in good. Whereas you go into this scene, it's 2 cameras, and technically it's 3 cameras, because a lot of these shots up against the brick wall when they were Blackmagic were originally raw, and then because we didn't have the resources to just edit raw, we had to re-encode them into ProRes. And so some of these shots on the brick wall are ProRes, and some of these shots are raw converted to ProRes, basically abandoning the whole point of raw. And so there is a difference there. So basically the 3 cameras we're dealing with for this whole sort of sitting up against the brick wall thing is some baked in Sony, and it is what it is. There's some focus mistakes. Oh well, there's some dirt on the lens that's at a certain point, which is going to probably be the last thing I fix, but I think this whole sequence at the end, there's dirt all over the lens, all over the sensor, and you can see it. Yep, there it is. Look at that. There's a piece of hair, there's a piece of dust, a huge piece of dust. But yeah, we got Blackmagic, and then we got all versions of Sony, some of them very, 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 very blown out. Yeah, is it worth going through the trouble of trying to save an image like this? And the short answer is yes, and the long answer is, do your best, but just without doing the node tree, because I do want to actually talk about the node tree in a second too. Let's just do what I would do normally to try to save an image like this, because I think that's helpful, because I think when you're starting out, this kind of thing happens a lot, but even when you're not, the kind of thing happens. Unless you're shooting raw, this kind of thing will happen once in a while. Yeah, okay, so let's see here. I traditionally like to control exposure using the HDR wheels. And so if you go to global, it says exposure. From what I've been told and everybody I follow, this exposure slider should be, let me move it. We'll just, okay. So I'm in here, over to the HDR wheels. So right here it says exposure. So in theory, this should act like exposure the way a camera behaves. I more or less believe it. Some people don't believe it. So let's go down one whole stop. It looks like we saved it. I'd say, let's just cover that node. Just know that there's only one node up here. That's fine. So, or we can scoot this node over here. There we go. Okay. So now I'm uncomfortable and I'm sweating. It's a mess. So, if we look at this graph, this is what we have, factory, there's nothing here. Everything's too blown out, but we do have latitude at the bottom, so it was basically just a way too aggressive exposed to the right, which is the thing you can do. It's Rec 709. Honestly, knowing what I know now, given the fact that we were shooting Rec 709 8-bit, I would have exposed to the right and then brought it down in post, or I would have actually, honestly, this camera has such good dynamic range, I probably would have just left it exposed correctly. But yeah, so with -1 exposure, I think that saved it. It may have even been too much, but it looks like, I don't know, have we lost detail in his clothes? I'm unsure. Is there more detail to save? We can go to, you can do more in HDR. Like HDR, you can go all the way to highlight, and so it'll tell you basically his face and his shirt are as bright as you can be, and then specular, there's no speculars in the shot. But we could bring it down a little bit, but I don't know that it's just gonna look muddy, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's why I only mess with sort of the global exposure, just because I don't, unless I'm doing something really specific, it's just not worth it. Because even the light, yeah, you know, it grabs a lot, but it's basically doing the same thing as log wheels, and I'm just so much faster with log wheels. So we're back in regular primaries. We'll go to log, and we'll just, you know, we'll see where the highlights can go. So let's split the difference here. So let's do 0.5, negative 0.5. And yeah, even that's pretty close. Right? I think we're definitely getting more detail back on his skin, which is the most important thing. I could give two shits about whether or not his goofy white blue shirt is blown out, but if his skin is gone, then we're boned. And there's definitely a hard line here. Let me see if the qualifier will poke it. But it looks like it's a soft line here. So in theory, we could scoot this up. I think we're okay. I'm going to call this negative 0.5. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you can also do this in curves. You can make like a really aggressive curve up here. Well, actually, let's delete that first. That'll be a middle, and we'll do a really aggressive curve up here, and then do, you know, one of these where it's works its way up. That's sort of the high dynamic range cheater, is do that and then do one of these. But that's not what I'm going for. I don't like to do this. I don't like to do the curve graph manually, personally, just because my brain doesn't think that way. Like I've seen people do it. I know how to do it kind of, but I have a much more direct if I'm just using the scrollers. So we're gonna bring the highlights back up. See if we can bring the highlights down. How about? And then we'll see if we can bring the exposure up, the highlights down. Nah, say I said don't do the curves, and then I did the curves anyway. Yeah, so we'll bring the highlights down. And I think the big trick with this is going to be just we gotta outline him and just bring his whole level down. So I'm just going to do a messy mask here, because obviously he is 1,000 degrees. There's like 4 or 5 of these shots. Otherwise, I wouldn't be farting around with this. But there is a ton of these shots in the show. So I think it is going to have to be, yeah, highlights and then the midtones now. All right, let's go back to regular and just bring the gain down. And then the contrast up maybe. The issue is every time you add contrast, you lose that softness that was in his face because it is so much brighter on one side of his face. I don't know. There's a way to do it. I'm sure there is. Part of it's going to be that, but yeah, you can still see that like the middle part of his face is always going to, his forehead is always going to be too blown out. So, yeah, that'll definitely be a good enough situation. Unfortunately, we'll have to figure out how to get it to match good enough with some neighbor shots that are not quite as blown out. So like this, for instance. Yeah, so we're gonna have to get these two shots to look close enough that they're even not that far away right now. I mean, that's a problem, but honestly, I could probably let's just bring the whole exposure of everything down. Like, where does the bricks, like there, and then his face is still too hot, but we can bring that down. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Neither here nor there. So the other thing I wanted to point to, other than let me go back to the timeline. So we had timeline, scene 6, scene 7. So scene 7 is the other thing. So it basically goes. They're all sitting there. They're having a tiff, and then he gets up and sort of marches away because he's kind of a wang, and then the security guard yells at him, and he sits on it, and then he says something, and the security guard yells at him again, and he runs away. Yeah, security guard tells him to leave, and then he walks to his car, where they're sitting in the back of the car now. And so this one's going to need a lot of work too. So if scene 6 is going to need the most work because it's just got a lot of mistakes in it, and it's got basically 3 different cameras. Scene 7, it will also probably in the same period have to do it, because some of this looks fine. I have no problem with this. I actually have no problem with this. Like, all the baked in stuff actually looks fairly okay. It doesn't perfectly match, and so it's going to need a little bit of work. But then there's also, you know, Blackmagic log footage in here that needs to get catched up. I will say that I don't actually remember these days anymore, especially with my brain having COVID brain, what like the Walter Vopato or the Colin Kelly rule is for matching cameras, but the way I do it, or the way I will be doing it for this at least, is find the shot that I like in the Rec 709, the baked in stuff that I know I basically don't have any control over, and I'm going to color to that because I know I can get this Blackmagic log footage to color to something like this. I'll probably have to split the difference a little bit and find a slightly worse of the Sony shots, like maybe that, and try to get the good looking stuff to look like that, because I don't know with this low contrast one if I can get it to look as good as that. I just don't know. Obviously, you can. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but I can tell that what happened was they open the back. The hatch is open, and so there's light. There's like warm light coming in from the back, whereas this other shot, I think the hatch is closed, but either way, there's sort of a bluer haze. So I could probably try to fix that, but I'm just not sure I can. But this is probably closer to the true to the day than what this stuff was, but I think this looks better. So yeah, for this scene, probably I'll have to live in this blue environment, which makes sense. They're in a car, so it's not completely unheard of. And my first job will try to get all these better looking Sony shots to look like this blue environment, or at least close enough. And the big things to sell it are the skin tones, especially her skin tones and also his skin tones. The main guy's skin tones, he looks just like everybody else. It's not a big deal. Him and the main guy have a pretty close skin tone color. The issue I've found with her previously when color grading is her skin tones vary based on environment a lot more, and then she's wearing this sort of teal like sweater thing, and the teal drifts a lot too in color. So yeah, so them's the big challenges. Yeah, and so here's I'd say the most competent version of using the 2 cameras inappropriately, which is to say one is in Rec 709, one's in log. But in the best possible situation, because this is sunset, and so even this is sort of like late afternoon, and then this is legit sunset, and it's a golden hour, so it already looks beautiful. And so you just got to make sure the skin tones and the hues and everything are in the same universe. When I do the node tree, one of the things I will do is I will make sure that I color space transform everything. So even though this is in Blackmagic log, Gen 1 or whatever, I'm going to color space transform it so that in the timeline that I'm working in, it's going to be Davinci wide gamut, Davinci intermediate. I'm going to work in that timeline, so I'm going to go, I can do it right now actually. So color space transform, and then we can Control S or Alt S, color space transform. So we have 2 color space transforms, and so our entire project is going to live between these 2. And I'll show how to do that on my node tree probably next time. But the first color space transform, I can move my face out of the way, is going to be, we're going to go from Blackmagic. I believe it's film Gen 1 to, and then it's video. Okay. Input gamma, it's got to be Blackmagic design film. Yeah, Blackmagic design film. And then the output is going to be Davinci wide gamut, and then Davinci intermediate. And so then all the work will be in between these 2 nodes in a big node tree. And then this is going to be Davinci wide gamut, Davinci intermediate to Rec 709, gamma 2.4. Yeah, and so that's going to be what it is. So it's just how I like to work. Maybe at some point I'll explain why working in a given color space, even though it's not the camera's color space, is a way to do it. If you want a better explanation, Colin Kelly or Walter Vopato, or who's the other guy that's so good at it? Colin Kelly is the one that I'm thinking of. But basically, I like it better. And so I can take this template and then also apply it to the Rec 709. And so all I got to change, you know, obviously this looks bad because it's Blackmagic and it's confused, but all you got to change is this first one. You got to change it to Sony. And we're going to say, actually, it's not even Sony, it's just Rec 7. What am I saying? It's just Rec 709. So it's going to be Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, or just Rec 709, but I prefer Gamma 2.4. And so in theory, we could turn these on and off and they won't do anything. Yeah, see? But you can still work inside of this. So that's what I would prefer to do with the Sonys. So the Sonys are all going to say Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, 2 wide gamut Davinci, and then out basically the reverse Davinci to Rec 709 2.4, just so I can work in the Davinci wide gamut because I like working in the Davinci wide gamut. I've colored an entire project in Rec 709 many times, especially when I was starting out and I didn't know better. There's no problem with it. I mean, it's in theory there's less ability to do stuff, but I like to have everything in the same working color space when I'm working in it, just because it makes me feel good. And I know that I have the best chance of getting the colors to all match when I'm doing that. And so another way you could do it is, because, you know, the Blackmagic log is Blackmagic log, I could set the Blackmagic log to, we'll just do it. We'll set it to Rec 709. Let's do the whole thing to Rec 709. You know, so we'll do, from the beginning, we'll do Blackmagic to Rec 709. I've got to find it. There we go. Gamma 2.4. And then what we'll do is we'll add another node, and we'll do Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 to Davinci wide gamut, so that I'm working the Davinci wide gamut, if that makes sense. So I'm not gonna go through my Walter Vopato node tree tonight. That seems like a total waste of everybody's time. But let's see, Davinci. Also, my brain is still not super happy, and I'm just kind of sweaty and uncomfortable. So again, if I turn on these on and off, the only thing that's different is now I'm already doing the Rec 709 conversion, which is not like mathematically or like workflow wise ideal for log footage, but it is, to simplify the workflow. I could do it that way. I'm not going to do it that way because I'm okay with doing the couple extra steps. But if you're really in a hurry and most of your footage is in Rec 709 and you have just some footage that's just not, you could take the fancy footage, because it's the stuff that's more malleable to begin with, and convert it into the other camera's format for that reason. There's also third-party plugins that'll do it. Film Convert and Film Convert, or I guess Film Convert Nitrate is what it's called, will kind of do it for you, but then it gives you sort of the same sort of Adobe Premiere, or whatever I don't even know what they call their color grading tools. Adobe Lightroom style tools, basically, to adjust stuff, which if you're color grading, you know, use Davinci Resolve. But you can use Film Convert to convert all the cameras to get closer to each other anyway. I don't use it. Maybe at some point I'll actually in earnest use it. I haven't used it professionally on a project because I just I like the amount of control that I have, and I don't know what's under the hood of the Film Convert stuff, and I don't want to have to go through the sort of troubleshooting on a project. I want to be able to do that on my own time. So I could do, I guess by that logic, I could do that on this project because this is an own time project, but I feel like that's going to set me back even further than I'm already back. So I'm going to do it this way. But basically, yeah, all the Rec 709 stuff is just going to be in Rec 709, with the middle part of it where all the work is done is going to be in Davinci wide gamut, Davinci intermediate, because that's what I'm comfortable doing it in. There's a way to do it automatically, but because this footage is so all over the place, I haven't select color managed. Sometimes I select color managed, but especially if I'm using like Blackmagic Raw or just, you know, my own projects where I know exactly how I shot it, I'll do color managed because it'll figure it out fine and there's no problem with that. But for stuff that I know I'm gonna have to probably just continuously tweak because the colors are all gonna be different because not only the cameras are different but the environments are different, I'd rather just have it as nodes instead of just automatic. But automatic is definitely faster. But I just, you know, the workaround when that one clip you have to do it manually and you have everything set to automatic is so much worse than just having to do it manually at the beginning, honestly. So, well, that was insane. That was an absolutely insane thing. Did we learn anything? Next time, I will give my honest attempt at a Walter Volpato node tree. This is what it is. Basically, this is where 80% of my color grade is going to have to be. It's the base, exposure, contrast stuff. And then his next node is noise reduction / dynamic range, which for me is the reason I started is because it's a it's going to be shared nodes. And then we got 3 rows, so 3 parallel nodes. So first row is exposure stuff. Second row is mostly just color and curves and stuff. And then third row is whatever needs to be. This is sort of the, you know, we couldn't find a spot for anything else. Back into the parallel mixer key pass, which I'll probably never use because that's for keys. And then this is just, you know, OFX, like grain or whatever, vignettes, outside node, camera angle, exposure adjustment if you need it. And then we got, you know, the other big corrector node for the scene, which is the shared node, the DP's node, so the DP's pass, and then the Hail Mary pass, which is, you know, when the DP's girlfriend shows up and she says something that makes the producer change his mind about something, and obviously you want to turn that node off as soon as she leaves the room. Out. So most of the time is spent in this for me because that's just how it's going to be, and then this is going to be for the scene for later, and then I'm not so sure I'm going to use all of these extra nodes, but it's just I'm trying to reteach myself the good practices, and I really trust Walter Volpato's system because it makes sense to me. I'm getting to the point where I can just look and where I'm looking, like which node I'm looking at. I know approximately what I did. That's how he does it, because otherwise you get in a situation where you just keep adding nodes everywhere, and there's just nodes absolutely everywhere, and like, what are you gonna, like, at some point it's just chaos. It's what are you even doing here? So I like this structure. I like the shape of it, so I'm gonna do that. God, I'm so uncomfortable. I thought I'd be okay, but apparently when you're dealing with post-COVID, the sort of like the camera sweats is like 10 times, and my voice definitely sounds like I've just been gargling salt water for 3 days. So yeah, I'm gonna go get a good night's sleep. I'll catch you next time. So.